I hate my pharmacy manager. Today we're going to be talking about barriers for leaders in pharmacy and what could be a great start to building great teams and great leadership in our profession. Let's jump in. I hate you. I don't think any stronger words can be said to a human being that hurts so much. And yet it's been something that has followed us ever since the beginning of civilization. Tribe against tribe, people against people, religion against religion. Hatred causes so much pain and suffering, from war to rioting to divorce to a breaking up of a relationship. Hatred follows us around like a black cloud, causing us always to be full of misery and pain. And unfortunately, what is very true is the saying, people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses. Jim Clifton, who is the CEO of Gallup poll, possibly the most prestigious career-based research facility in the world, and in it, he wrote a blog that was very interesting. He said, quote, "Many people in the world hate their job, especially their boss. Employees everywhere don't necessarily hate the company or the organization they work for as much as they do their boss. Employees, especially the stars, join a company and then quit the manager. It may not be the manager's fault so much as these managers have not been prepared to coach the new workforce." Sometimes the boss has always been the traditional bad guy in movies, right? It's the one with all the power or the money that we kind of want to secretly hate. Jabba the Hutt, Montgomery Burns from The Simpsons, the guy from Office Space.
Hello, Peter. What's happening? I'm gonna need you to go ahead and come in tomorrow. So if you could be here around 9, that would be great. Okay?
But what's a boss to do? I mean, can you really blame them sometimes? Yeah, I know in many retail settings, sometimes their bosses are not even pharmacists now, which is an absolute travesty. I mean, who can blame them, right? We know that the odds are not in their favor for mid-level managers. Upper management does not have their backs many times. They know that they're kind of like the in-between between the front lines and the higher echelon of leadership. And many times it kind of feels like kind of a whipping going on you, which in turn means that you as a mid-level manager whip the front lines into shape. And so in turn, that means your direct reports don't listen to you. They don't seem to get it. They don't seem to get their act together. Upper management scolds you for the poor performance of those that are beneath you, but they don't seem to listen to you, do they? And in some organizations, I won't name who, but everyone knows that they change managers like they change oil in their car. It's about every other few months that a new person comes in and then either is shown the door or they leave entirely. But how can you change your situation? Everyone seems to hate your guts, or they don't respect you, or they're not listening. What can you do to change this situation around as a leader? Even if you don't have the word manager in your title, I still think that you can change things. But what can you do? Well, I think that a man from the South, a musician actually, can give us some insight. Daryl Davis is a 50-something-year-old black man in the South, and he loves to play some music. Daryl has a unique hobby. It isn't flying planes or model trains or even video games. He likes to befriend members of the KKK.
Some of their beliefs are that African Americans, black people, are born with smaller brains, that we are inherently lazy, we are inherently prone to crime.
The KKK is arguably one of the most hated groups in the United States. It's something that I think most people in general do not like, the fact that we have this group here. It's a group that's really based on hatred of another group, and actually not just one group, but many. KKK members have a belief, one that seems to be well justified in their minds. And because it's justified, they take action. They get the robes on, they join this group, they pay their dues, they go to cross burnings, maybe, and they even protest in some cases. From their perspective, everyone else is wrong and they are right. Their psyches drive them to make decisions that most people would not agree with, including myself. But what's so funny and interesting about all this is that Daryl, a black man who is hated by this group, has extended a hand of friendship, and he's done it in a very unique way.
There is one question Daryl has repeatedly asked members of the Klan.
How can you hate me when you don't even know me? They've never had an answer that they can come up with that justifies how they can hate me.
What Daryl does is, by asking a powerful question, he opens a conversation.
I would find things in common. And as I began to build on those commonalities, the things that we had in contrast as trivial as skin color began to matter less and less. And as I built upon those commonalities, a relationship was formed.
If this man can commit to some humility and to say, hey, what's going on? How can you hate me if you don't know me? And by starting a conversation, by validating them as people, rather than condemning them and saying, you're full of hate, you're stupid, you need to just quit and stop all this nonsense, he instead opens up a conversation with them and listens to them. And by listening to them, he's able to hear their objections, their thoughts, their beliefs, which, in my opinion, I think most people would believe is totally wrong, it's off. But he's able to penetrate through those beliefs by asking questions and sharing stories and getting to know them. He changes their minds. He changes their perspective. So, taking from his example, imagine if a pharmacy manager was able to extend the same kind of humility, faith, I suppose, and by asking questions and listening, imagine what could happen to a team. Now, I know that the comparison here automatically makes a pharmacy team look bad. I want to say it very clearly here that that's not the comparison we're trying to draw. Instead, we want to look to Daryl as an example. Through humility and a question, he's able to overcome such extreme hatred that he has converted people out of the KKK. Now, I certainly don't want to compare the ideologies of this hateful group to pharmacists, but instead I want to compare leadership style of Daryl to what we should adopt in the workplace. Because what is true of direct reports in pharmacy, pharmacists on the front lines, and technicians and other staff is that everyone believes what they're doing is right. We very rarely think that we are wrong and we're willing to admit it in the workplace. It's hard to do that, right? Because it doesn't feel right. We want to be right in our decisions, whether we justify it through emotions or logic. And when you're on the front lines, you can often look to the manager as the reason as to why things are not going the way you want them to. And so as a manager, you become the enemy rather than the ally. You cannot force someone to believe something, even if you tell them that it is true. That's not how we work as humans. We have to see examples of things in order to really believe it. My first boss ever at my real first pharmacy job told me verbatim, I am not a micromanaging boss. And at face value, I believed it until I experienced the truth. Because when I got calls about my performance, when I received phone calls after meetings, when I was brought into a regular meeting practically every day about how I was doing, I did not feel like I had a boss that would let me make decisions on my own. I had a micromanaging boss, and the evidence was her performance, what she was doing in my work life. I started doing my own research about why pharmacists leave their jobs about a year ago in 2018. And I asked pharmacists on LinkedIn to fill out a survey whenever they got a new job and transitioned. And one of the questions I asked them is, do you feel your direct supervisor listened to you? Out of 57 people who responded, 53 said no. Roughly 54% of pharmacists felt like their boss did not listen to them. Listening, engaging, and validation are one of the key cornerstones of effective team communication, and it must be present in the workplace. If not, then is there any wonder that things are not going the way they are? I feel like the workplace often is so similar to the family, right? You remember like when your dad said something that you knew was just total BS because you knew the truth. You knew that what he said wasn't the real reality. Well, I think many managers are delusional about where they stand to their colleagues and to their direct reports. They think something is true when in fact, everyone on the front lines just shakes their heads and knows what's real. And unfortunately, what happens is that the manager is not willing to listen to people on the front lines to hear what's going on and to actually want to make a change. Most people feel like in the beginning of the career that they can make some changes. They do want to see things improve. And so they bring things forward to their manager only to find out that that change is, it's too impractical. It isn't realistic. It would cost too much money. And so their ideas are shut down. I remember discovering so many inefficiencies in my very first job. And I discovered a lot of shortcuts on how to make things better in the system. When I brought it forward in one of our team meetings, I was not met with any kind of enthusiasm. I just was told, oh, that's nice. And that was the end of that. I didn't even really realize what had happened until I talked with another coworker about this, and he said, yeah, that's normal. The first step to understand your team is to listen, then be understood. I take this directly from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand, then be understood. The simple idea is that when people are listening to each other, usually what they're really doing is just prepping themselves to speak next when they're done talking. How many times have you done that? Maybe when you're in an argument with a family member where you're talking back and forth and no one's really listening to each other. It's just quips after quips, accusations after accusations, and it's a struggle to get a word in, right? Well, it's usually because people aren't listening to each other. What reflective listening really is a process of hearing someone speak, not thinking about what you're going to say next, but instead restating in your own words through reflective statements where you are saying what their situation is to make sure that you understand where they are coming from. The opposite is where we're just trying to fight and be understood, and no one seems to be listening to each other. But by validating someone to say in your own words what is going through their minds, you are giving them that validation and they feel like you understand where they're coming from. Here's a simple test. The next time you're listening to a family member or a friend, don't speak right away. When they're telling you a story or they're telling you something bad that had happened, just listen and then see how long it takes for you to try to reword what you think they're saying. They probably won't even understand that you're doing this. I remember trying it first out on my wife. Yep, sorry, Megan, I know. And I do this actually from time to time with her because guess what? I argue with my wife. And when we are in that state, I want to make sure that I understand where she's coming from. Now, guess what? I don't do it all the time. I'm not perfect, but I know you aren't either. So we're on common ground here. But in the workplace, you as a leader can really make people feel like they're understood and heard. Now, Of course, what's really important is that you take that information, you actually do something with it rather than just making it into a therapy session. That's useless. You as a leader can make changes. You can do things to make your colleagues' lives better. Because if you don't, I mean, let's just think about the opposite. Let's say you don't do these things in your communication exercises. Then what's the point? Work is getting worse. Everyone knows that they want more with less. And if you aren't fighting for your people, then no one is. You're the one as a manager who's meant to defend them. You're meant to fight for them. And I've spoken with enough pharmacists on the front lines to know that they feel like their managers are nothing but there to just crack the whip. You can make such a difference that even if, yes, the workload is hard and their upper management is asking you to do more with less, that you can be the person as to why people stay. People don't leave jobs because of the companies, they leave because of the bosses. And by being a great boss, you can make work great. Listen, my first job ever, my first real pharmacy job was awful. I hated it. And it was because of my boss and the work environment that she allowed to happen, a bullying environment. I wanted to leave. I felt like going into work was such a huge struggle. But when that person left and I got my new boss, I felt like he listened to me. He defended me when physicians wanted to blame me for certain things. He understood me and I felt like I could share with him my concerns, and he listened and he did something with my concerns. It was bittersweet leaving that work environment because I enjoyed working with him and for him. Even though I didn't really love the work and I didn't feel really alive in doing it, it was hard because it was the first time I felt like a boss actually listened to me. You have such a power over the people that you are supposed to be supporting. And instead of cracking the whip, you can change things to make their lives so much better. If you are the boss, you hold your direct reports, you hold their happiness in your hand. And it's so easy to just squish the life out of their enjoyment of work. Look, this technique won't work for everyone. It is not going to make everything better. It really does work as a manager to use in tough situations. But you have to really listen. You can't just wish this problem away by becoming like a therapist. You have to do something with this information. You have to make sure they feel understood, but also make a change, make work better. And you do have that power to do so. Work is hard, but wouldn't it be so much better if everyone felt like they were on the same team? Look, if you're a manager, I know things are working against you, but you can make small changes today for your team, for the people that you work for, so that everyone can feel together in this fight against, I don't know, whatever it is the common enemy should be. But you can lead them in a powerful way where they feel understood. And most importantly, after they feel understood, you can then be understood by them. But it isn't the other way around. My friend, take small steps today to make your team really love working for you. My name is Alex Barker. This has been the Happy PharmD podcast. Thank you for listening. And I'd love to hear from you. What sort of things do you do to make sure your team feels appreciated, that you actually care about them? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to learn from you and your own leadership stories. Thanks for listening to this episode. And hey, click like, subscribe. We, of course, always need your support. So until next time, sayonara.